Hey everyone, welcome to the very first episode of the Creative Belief podcast. This is a brand new podcast that we're launching out of our design studio, Creator Studio, a creative brand studio based here in the Indianapolis area. And the goal for this podcast, the goal why we're doing this, is we want to share a curated collection of conversations with creatives who believe that creativity can change the world. My name is Alex. I get to be the co-owner and creative director at Creator Studio. And I am joined by the one and only Josh Day. Josh is a dear friend of mine, business partner. He's our senior brand designer at Creator Studio. And I can't wait to do this podcast with you. Josh, what's up, man?
Yeah, nothing. I'm here, man. You can't wait to do this podcast with me. And I'm more of like, I never wanted to do a podcast, but here I am. So
here you are, man. I'm proud of you.
Yeah, I guess I got to try some new things.
You do. When we started Creator Studio, long story about how this thing got started. We'll share that at some point. But I told Josh, like, hey, I want to do this podcast. I've got this idea. Do you want to do it with me? And like most of our relationship over the last 10 years, I dragged Josh into something that he had no clue about what he was getting into. Where does this compare to some of the other adventures that I've dragged you into?
I would probably say definitely in the top 5, but I'd probably put it around like 4 or 5 because there's a few things where I thought I was going to die. So as long as my life is not on the line here on the podcast, those ones will remain at the top. And
okay. There's a lot of mystery in what you just said to people who are listening. And I can't guarantee that your life will be, safe the entire time we're recording, but I will do my best to care for you along the way.
That's all I ask.
Okay, great. So Josh and I have known each other for 10 plus years. We met through kind of an awkward situation. I was working as a communications director for an organization. I was working with Josh's father-in-law, didn't know that at the time. And he came to me and said, hey, we want to do a rebrand of this part of our organization. My son-in-law does some design stuff. Here's the logo. And I looked at it and I said, hey, 1, that's not our process. And 2, that logo is absolute trash. We will never use that in our organization. Fast forward, maybe a year later, my wife and I were back up in Indy visiting some friends where we had used to work. And there's this new dude there named Josh Day. And so we get introduced to him and start to have these conversations about like, oh, where are you guys from? Da, 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 da. And instantly make the connection that the guy that I had worked with, Josh's father-in-law, was who he was, and made the connection that Josh was the designer who had designed the logo that I said was absolute trash. And I instantly was like, we got to get out of here. Like, I really hope that Josh's father-in-law didn't say my exact words to him. And that really just kind of kicked off a 10-year friendship of creativity and sharing life with our families.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. And I think it just goes to show that since our friendship basically started like that, that you're kind of in debt to the things I say to you because of the way that you just treated me without even knowing me. So
it's so true.
It's on you, man.
It is on
what
me.
You
That's
deserve.
Fair. Oh my gosh. If you don't know Josh and I, like, this is our relationship. This is how we are with each other. And it's the best part of being friends. So Josh, let's talk about this podcast, right? Because I did force you to do this, but I think it's going to be an incredible ride. Let's talk about why we're doing this, right? I think we both believe that there aren't enough creative conversations that happen around the power of creativity. So one, we really wanted to start a podcast where we get to talk to people that inspire us, people that we think are crushing it in their field of creativity. and hear their story, hear their backstory, get to know them a little bit better, and get to share some like wisdom and insight from them with our guests. The other thing is that we want to kind of open the door to what it means to be a creative, right? Like we deeply believe that we were all made to create, whatever it is, and wherever that sphere of influence you have is, you are a creative, and you were made to create incredible things that make the world a better place. And so we want to kind of open up the definition of creativity and what a creative is, and talk to people in a variety of different fields that like we may not traditionally label as creative fields. But we want to talk to those people. We want to hear their story because their craft is as creative as my craft, as your craft, Josh, as what we do in our brand design studio, right? Like my barber is going to be on the show. Kelso's a baller. He has some of the best cuts in indie. Dude is a wildly creative person because he starts with a canvas and creates something that looks insanely good. He may not label himself as a creative, but we see him as a creative. And so those are the kinds of stories that we want to talk about and share on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's this creative spark within all of us that sometimes just needs to be unlocked. I think so often people, either they've been told they're not creative because of maybe the career choice that they've made or whatever that might be. And in reality, like, I think when we kind of redefine or just open up the definition of that word a little bit more, we start to understand it, and hopefully people will see that even in their field of whatever it might be, like that they have a level of creativity inside of them. And it just reminds me of a quick story. At that same organization we first met, we were hiring a project manager. We had a really good applicant, and she was coming from the world of business and finance. And she was very intimidated to join a creative team. And she just kept saying, I'm not creative, so I don't know how I'm going to fit in here. I'm not creative. And we thought, you're a great applicant for this position, but you also are very creative. So anyways, went on to hire her. She was awesome. And the way that she creatively, worked our schedules and projects and communicated with clients and all of that was like something that I could never do. And so we started to help her redefine, like, you say you're not creative, and I think you just mean it in the scope of art specifically.
Right.
But in reality, what you're doing and the way you're doing it is beyond anything that any of us can do. And it is a very creative process of what you're doing. So just, there's just these moments. Yeah. There's these moments. And as creatives, I think when you identify yourself as a creative too, like it's kind of on you also to help other people understand that and see that in themselves as well.
Yeah. Yeah. We talk a lot. Josh and I have talked about this for years, that creativity is really just coming up with solutions to problems, right? Like you are using your brain to creatively solve a problem. And so that can be in the world of design and art. How am I going to lay out this photo package, typography, color? How am I going to lay all that out into something that communicates a story? But that can also be, I think we joke with our buddy Tyler all the time, like Tyler's in finance. I've had Tyler help me with a few spreadsheets because he's like a wizard in that world. And they're the best looking spreadsheets that I've ever seen in my life. He creatively is solving the problem of how do I clearly communicate information through a spreadsheet, which is like traditionally a pretty boring thing to look at. How do I help people see what they need to see in this? So he's a creative in the world of finance. And so that's why we will die on that hill of everyone is a creative and you were made to create, and you can't convince us differently. So if you want to come and come at us on that, like, let's go. But that's what like I'll rumble with someone on that.
Throwing hands.
But that's why we want to start this podcast, is because we want to expose those conversations. And sure, we're going to talk to a bunch of traditional creatives, people in the world of design, photography, film, but we're also going to talk to a bunch of people who we may not creative, like the creative industry may not label as a creative, because we think their stories are just as valuable, just as inspiring, and the work they're doing is making the world a better place. And that's what we want to do. So I also, Josh, think it's important as we start this journey for people to like know us a little bit more. Two random dudes that they're listening to on a podcast. I think it's important for them to hear our journey into creativity, because I think sometimes we see these like up and to the right moments with companies. Right, we've started a brand design studio. It's been super successful so far, but it's been a long journey to get here. Like this is not, we didn't like always have success, and our journeys into creativity were both super different. So I think it'd be awesome to hear like, how did you get into creativity? How did you get into this world of creating and ultimately land being in the design space?
Yeah, honestly, I don't know if I'm different from people in my field, but I don't know that I really envisioned myself in a position like this when I was younger. I think that I constantly had this like almost identity crisis in some ways. Like I was very much into sports. I played football, basketball, and baseball pretty much from this time I could until all through high school and even a little in college. And I thought that art was just a hobby. I always was into drawing and just creative outlets like that. And so I think that like for me, it was always something I really loved, but I just kind of always did, um, you know, in my room or, just when I needed to feel like I needed to burn off some steam. But I had always heard the things of like artists, won't ever make any money. And the only, my maybe my scope of art and artists was pretty small, but it was, like if you're going to be an artist, you got to be a painter. And I didn't really like painting. So I was like, well, guess I'm out on this, which is fine. Doesn't sound like I'm going to make any money anyways. And so I went a totally different route. But I remember in high school, I had to sign up for classes my sophomore year. And I had one block open and it was take a second math class, which absolutely not.
Trash,
no, thank you.
Trash.
Or take this class called commercial art, which honestly, I had no idea what that even meant. But I was like, that sounds way better than math. And I remember I walked into the commercial art room and there was a wall of IMAX. And I was like, whoa, what is this? Like whole new world here. I have no idea. This looks so pretty, but I've never experienced this. And so started to realize that this class was, like introduction into Photoshop and InDesign and Illustrator and all that. And had no idea that these things even existed. And I just fell in love like right away. I was like, man, this is awesome. I was so hooked. And then immediately took all of those classes I could at my small little high school in Illinois. And from there still thought, like it'll always be a part of my life, but it won't be like what is my main source of income or like what my career is. It'll always kind of be a side hustle or just something I do for fun or for free for some people every now and then. But in that process, continued to just really develop my skills. And about 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I realized I kind of did want to make this a career, a full-time job, and applied to a couple of different places and was just like, man, if I can get an interview, like that would be a great first step because at least I know like interview questions for what designers are being asked and just to get, more experience here and there. I kind of always thought it'd be a slower process to kind of get in than when it ended up happening. And so when I first got hired as a graphic designer, I was like, holy crap, this is crazy. Like I couldn't believe
like
that
I shouldn't be here right now.
Yeah, I shouldn't be here. Like what is going on? But at the same time, it was so exciting when somebody believed in me and saw things in me that even as somebody coming from a whole another field and into a world of design that still knew very little. When I first started as a full-time designer, I only knew Photoshop. And when I told my boss that, they thought I was pretty crazy. Like, how are you doing some of these things in Photoshop? And I was like, yeah, I'm so scared to like learn anything else. And so they worked with me, and, you know, you mentioned Tyler, but his wife, Ashley, I worked with, she taught both you and I Adobe Illustrator.
She did.
So
thank you to Ashley's college degree.
Shout out Ashley's college degree and her patience to teach us, for sure. And from there, like, things just really took off. I think I kind of always had this like tension of wanting to dive more into creative and get to know creative people. But my network was like not like that. And so as I even started this job, like, meeting you was huge for me. Like, that was the first time really being a part of this team that I'd start to meet other designers and other creatives. Like, it wasn't just me throwing together some ideas and then people being like, yeah, it looks great. I started to get feedback from trusted people, and I started to my craft, and things really started to grow, which was awesome. I think that, like, it was something I had been wanting for so long, that as an introvert, as somebody that just doesn't like to really get out a whole lot, you know, it was kind of nice when it sort of fell in my lap a little bit, those relationships. And you know, from there, like, our creative journeys kind of like overlapped and then went back and forth, and we through that process you and I continued to do some things together, and always talked about building something, and always talked about doing different things. And there's only a couple people in my life that have that make me do things that are I'm not comfortable with, and one is my wife, and the other one is Alex Holt. So
that's great.
I never wanted to do a podcast. I've never even been a guest on a podcast. I listen to podcasts every now and then. But you all should definitely be listening to this podcast for sure. I mean, we have so much great things to say. I just can't wait to see the number of subscribers we get, because it's going to be insane. Yeah. So that's really my creative journey. Ups and downs, but excited to be here a little bit. Not hugely excited to talk on a podcast, but excited about where I am as a profession. But how about you, Alex? How about you? Let us know about your journey a little bit in creativity.
Yeah. One, I just got to say, dude, you crushed that. And through all the conversations we've recorded, you bring so much wisdom. So don't doubt yourself. You're doing an incredible job. And I would tell you if you were sucking, because that's the kind of friendship we have.
I appreciate that.
Anytime, man. Yeah. My like creative journey, I was super blessed to be in a relatively creative household growing up. My dad had been in like the multimedia space, right? Telecommunications is what he went to school for. And so he'd worked in the Indianapolis area at some TV like stations and done some stuff with them. He'd kind of been in that world, and then was in the world of teleconferencing at a really kind of early stage of that technology, and did a lot of work for the state library system. So I was always around cameras, computers, right? Like, we had a camera at our house all the time because my dad was bringing home stuff from work. My first feature film was a combo smash hit of what happens when you close the refrigerator and toilet cam. And just filmed like dumb stuff like that. And then my dad sat down and taught me how to edit. We had a PC at home and had Adobe Premiere. And so taught me how like video editing worked and how we had to like record tape into the computer, and just like, I got to be exposed to, I think, a lot. And that really kind of propelled my journey into a lot of different avenues. I spent time doing all that. I spent time in high school doing newspaper. So learning creative writing, right, was on those teams. I did TV broadcasting in high school. Like, all the creative things I could sink my teeth into, I did. And I was involved in live production through our church. Like, I was super involved in all these different things, and very similar, I think, Josh, to you. Like, at a young age, I had some people speak into me and say, hey, like, I think you could pursue this. I think this is a thing. I was not athletic. I broke my wrist and my foot playing tennis, of all sports. And so it was a pretty clear sign that, like, I should not be an athlete. I should not continue down that road. And that's true to this day. I'm just not the most coordinated individual. I played in a basketball league. And with our buddy Tyler, and I broke a dude's ankle coming down off of a rebound. So it's just pretty clear that I was not an athlete. And I feel bad for my kids because our son at least has probably inherited that from me. As much as he wants to be an athlete, he and I are just going to be like dedicated fans for life because we are not meant to be on the court. But had people speak into me and started just to step into opportunities, and was planning on going to college, was working a summer job as a creative at a church, and was given an opportunity to come on full-time creative staff at a church at 18. They were insane for thinking they should hire an 18-year-old, and I was a little crazy for doing it, but I also thought, why am I going to go to college and pay money to learn the thing that I'm going to go take this job and they're going to pay me to do and learn along the way? And so at 18, like, I started a full-time career in like that traditional lane of creativity, of filmmaking, of design. And in that space, I learned design. I learned Illustrator from our friend Ashley that we mentioned. Like, I learned a ton because people invested in me. And it's just kind of been a lot of different pursuits since then, a lot in the nonprofit space, but also have worked in the agency world, and worked for a variety of different organizations, leading teams, getting to be the boots on the ground, like day in and day out person creating. And now through kind of a wild 2024 and unexpected 2024, get to co-own this design studio with my wife. Which is something I had dreamed about for a long time, but like didn't see happening for another 4 or 5 years. And we were kind of thrust into it, and a ton of doors open and a ton of connections were made, and people said, hey, you should go for it. And we did. And Josh has been along for the ride since the beginning. And it's been incredible. Like, it's been an amazing journey. But I don't think I would be here today without the relationships, the people who have poured into me, the people who have said, hey, I see something in you and I believe that you've got something, and you need to go pursue it. And I think, Josh, similar to you, like, I had worked kind of solo for a long time. I was like this young, wild creative. And then when I got in that team setting and started to get feedback and started to have people like challenge my creativity in relatively healthy ways, that's when I like grew the most as a creative. When I had people who were willing to say, hey, like, you are talented, but you're also kind of being a tool about how you're presenting this. Or have you ever thought about this when it comes to design or film or storytelling? Maybe there's a different way to do what it is that you're doing. I look back and could name tons of people along the road that have helped me shape my creativity and just shape who I am today. And so that's kind of how I got into the world. And have loved every part of it, loved every team I've been on, loved every environment that I've been. There have been really hard days as a creative. Like, I think anytime you are solving problems constantly, it can be draining. And so I've had to learn a ton about how to sustain in the world of creativity. I know that's something we're going to talk about with several of our guests coming up, is like, how do you sustain as a creative? How do you find ways to like replenish yourself? How do you find ways to protect your mental health? Because that's super critical when you are creating and solving problems and helping to push other people's vision forward. And so that's kind of my journey. And that's kind of what's born this podcast, born this whole idea of getting to hear from other creatives and be inspired by them. I think for you and I, this is like our chance to shoot our shot and reach out to the people that like truly inspire us and say, hey, like, do you want to take a chance and chat with 2 random dudes who love creativity and would love to just hear your story? And thankfully people have said yes, which is wild. Like,
it's very wild. I think that selfishly, like, I am so excited these people are saying yes, because I just want to get to know them, be even more inspired by them, and just pick up some nuggets of wisdom along the way. Some of our guests have been doing what they're doing for a long time, 20 years. And so I think that, like, to hear about creatives that have been in that role for a while, like you were saying, is like, it can be hard. There are some
Yeah.
hard days. It can be draining. Burnout is a real thing in any role. So I think when you um, can talk to somebody that's been doing what you've been doing for, way longer than you've been doing it, it's really important to pick up like how they've been able to sustain that. And you guys will get to hear just some different ways that some of the lifelong creatives have been really refilling themselves,
Yeah.
and also some of them in a point of their careers where they like are realizing how to give back, and how
Yep.
giving back is so filling to them personally, but also it is giving opportunities for young creatives to really come into those roles, or to come into those environments and start to blossom and start to grow. And that's really what's exciting, I think, for me, is to just hear some of the personal stories and the personal things that people are sharing along the way about how they are doing what they do and how they go about it. And it goes beyond, just their day to day 9 to 5s. And so that's really exciting to get
Yeah.
to hear.
Yeah, I'm pumped about that. We do have some really incredible guests coming up on the show on this first season. We've got all kinds of creatives from all kinds of fields. Again, those traditional creative fields, but also the non-traditional. We've got people in the world of racing. So if you love racing, like Josh and I do, we've got people from that world joining us. We've got people from the world of basketball, football, like all kinds of sports, and that intersection of sports and design. And then we've got people from nonprofits who are creating really incredible products to serve nonprofits across the country. We've just got a variety of folks who have been super gracious and super kind and given us an hour of their time to chat with us. So we're super pumped about what this show can be. We're really hopeful for what it will be. And we hope that you will find these conversations inspiring, that you will find them a place that you can refuel, you can be recharged as a creative, and that you can be reminded that like you were made to create, right? Like we're going to talk about that at the end of every show. You were made to create, and we want to encourage you to go create incredible things that change the world and make the world a better place. So, this is the first episode. If you haven't already, go follow the show, go subscribe, Spotify and Apple Podcasts. If you're an audio listener, the show's also on YouTube. All of that is linked in however you found this show, but it's on the CRTR Studio YouTube profile. And we're also going to be sharing content from the show on our Instagram for our brand design studio, CRTR Studio. So you can find that at CRTR Studio on Instagram, and that's at CRTR Studio there on Instagram. So do that. Help us share these incredible conversations and let us know like what's hitting you, what's inspiring you, and tag us and let us know what creatives should we be talking to. Are there people that you know that you think, hey, their story needs to be told? People should hear about their process. Whatever it is, let us know. Send us a DM. We would love to be able to talk to those people and share their stories. So, Josh, thank you for once again begrudgingly saying yes to a crazy idea and doing this with me, man. I can't wait.
Yeah, I mean, I've said yes to crazier ideas from you, so
This is
here we go.
So we talked at the beginning. Where does this rank on like the meth head fridge pickup? Like,
Yeah,
is this above
the
or
meth
below?
head. No, it's definitely below.
Okay,
I thought for sure we were gonna die that day. So
I did too. Just to be clear, we'll tell that story another time. But I just needed to.
yeah,
I needed to gauge like where we were at on this. So.
yeah, no, yeah, that and driving a U-Haul across the country, just things like that. I mean,
Yeah, that was one of the best trips of my entire life.
It ended up being a great trip, but I think when I first said yes, I was like, what am I getting myself into here?
You had regrets. I had regrets too, but it was incredible. We'll tell all those stories at some point along the way. Thank you for joining us, and we can't wait to get this thing launched. Our first guest episode will launch next week, so make sure you check that out, and we'll chat with you all soon.